Welcome, dear friends, guests, and subscribers. Thank you for waiting for new episodes and joining the live broadcasts. It's really wonderful that you find time, whether it's convenient or not, but as they say, you join the conversations and discussions while the topics are still fresh. We talk about the events of the day and the upcoming events of the week, including the very intense victory parade with Denis Yelisevich, a well-known blogger. Denis, I welcome you.
Hello, Alexander.
You know, it's a very tense period. And really, right now, at this very moment, everyone is watching where the armed forces of Ukraine have launched drones. They're writing wishes and congratulations for May 9th to the armed forces of Ukraine in English for some reason. There are many of them. Attacks happened yesterday, both day and night. Basically, they're doing everything they can to prevent those designated leaders from arriving. Everyone is watching Vučić, who was forced to fly to Azerbaijan and wait there for some time. And apparently at this moment, as we're talking with Denis, he's heading to Moscow and Xi Jinping is also on his way in flight. Well, and some country leaders have already arrived. The meeting with Maduro, the Venezuelan, has already started. The Mongolian president has landed and exited the plane. In general, we will discuss all this within a very important, a big framework, because it seems like time is running out. And what will we get as a result? As always, I encourage everyone to subscribe to Denis Yelisevich, give this video a like, can't go anywhere without a like. The QR code lets you write what you want live on air. If this service is working, a big thank you to everyone for super thanks and super stickers, if this feature is working for you too. And of course, just for your questions that you leave in advance for our broadcast in the YouTube community and in the live chat. Chat with each other, write messages. At the end, we'll dedicate time specifically to the topics that concern you, and maybe to some nuances that we won't be able to cover during the broadcast. Here's today's conversation, Paul. What are your expectations after the May holidays? So, in other words, Victory Day will pass, and what should we expect next? An unprecedented escalation, the start of real peace talks will begin, or everything will continue as it is, wearing each other down. And the fourth option is that we expect elections, because after the third, they'll try to get re-elected. So those are the options regarding this question. Those are the expectations. Yes, that's the level of tension, but what will be the outcome? Let's begin, Denis. What do you think?
About your question.
Yes.
Combined, I think, out of four options, I see it as three mixed together, that kind of option. Everything will definitely go down, decline, and this will in no way cancel Zelensky's plans to run for a second term. That's what I think.
Friends, you vote. And in the end, we'll sum up what's going on with all this parade drama. Zelensky really went all out. The Russians are giving statistics, something like 520-something drones, Neptune missiles. Basically, it looks like he fired off everything he had or everything he had been stockpiling and preparing. But here's another point. As is commonly believed, we've always had this Ukrainian propaganda narrative that the Russians are always trying to capture or lose something or take action by certain dates, but here it's clearly Zelensky acting according to a specific date, and he's also expecting some kind of response, some kind of effect.
I think this massive attack can only be explained by one thing. All the air defense was pulled into Moscow to protect important people during the May 9th parade, and taking advantage of the moment, Zelensky decided to attack. The thing is, I always look at this through the lens of war or peace. And what intentions are you showing to both Trump and the whole world? As a strong supporter of peace, I still think such actions are not entirely right. Although, of course, people will write to me now and say, well, Putin is also bombing. Yes, Putin is bombing. But we need to be more balanced and clearly decide what we are declaring. Claiming to support peace while Putin rejects it and launching a major attack doesn't make sense. But in my understanding, again, now other people will say, haven't you seen the intelligence data? And this is strategically important, and this is the right thing to do, I don't know. I would still demonstrate first and foremost to Trump the maximum focus on peace and would try to work by other methods. But like this, it's just straightforward, absolutely pointless. Well, you strike, but they'll strike back, and again, our people will die. Yesterday, I was outraged. Kyiv burned at night. I have that kind of schedule, I can keep track of it, there's a big time difference, and a subscriber of Gordon sends me a preview for a video. Moscow is on fire, Bolotnaya Square is strewn with bodies, and at that very moment Kyiv is being bombed. So you look at all this and it's just madness and someone is watching this. Why? And all of this goes beyond some limits, I just can't wrap my head around it anymore.
And still, if we see that the cutoff point is political, the cutoff point is exactly that. Well, in just a few hours, literally, when the 8th comes, we're talking on May 7th, for those watching the recording, the 8th comes, it's midnight 0 minutes. And Russia hasn't withdrawn this order for a unilateral ceasefire. There's also a moment of truth here, much like Easter. Still, what do you think? Will Zelensky, let's say, disrupt or not adhere to this ceasefire?
Are you sure he won't adhere to it? I'll say right away, I don't believe in any bombing of Moscow. It's pointless and just plain stupid. And as I already said, all the air defense will be in Moscow and is already in Moscow. And as for the fact that they will bomb other regions, taking advantage of the situation, I have no doubt about that.
All right.
He won't observe any ceasefire because he has formally rejected it.
How will Trump react? Well, if possible, from the perspective of someone inside America, how do they view Zelensky, who is breaking the ceasefire specifically over these past 3 days?
I think Trump has long since given up trying to reason with Zelensky or find any kind of approach to him. Trump seems more focused on Putin now. You see, there was a conversation with a football official, and Trump didn't know that Russia had been excluded from the World Cup, which will be held in the United States in 2026. Trump says this is another leverage point, sort of. Like Ukraine, Russia is seen as a football country due to its history. A strong case, even for peace. People who don't know might think this isn't a good reason, but it truly is an argument, because this significantly affects the public. It's used to boost Putin's ratings and present a victory as a strong argument. I believe Putin is currently moving in this direction. Now let's hear from General Kellogg. There too, nothing is said about Zelensky anymore. It just says all of Ukraine is for a 30-day ceasefire. Yesterday he said a demilitarized zone of 30 kilometers. And Ukraine wants to separate along the current line of demarcation. And now it's all up to Putin. I mean, I see the American rhetoric, everything is shifting, it's up to Putin now. In addition, supporting my argument, a deal on minerals has been signed.
Signed but not ratified?
I'll talk about this ratification tomorrow, right? I'm more focused on the 8th in the Verkhovna Rada than the Moscow parade on May 9th and the bombings. Because, for example, I get different kinds of information. Poroshenko gave a strange speech, and I'm surprised and disappointed by bloggers, public figures, and politicians who have been speaking out all this time, for example. You, Zelensky, scoundrel like me, why aren't you signing? Zelensky signed everything, gave up the country, I just don't get it.
No, well, here the essence of the agreements comes up. Well, I mean, there were 2 committees. Yesterday there was a committee, yes, and they were revoting there, then the deputy and the committee. Before the vote, he suggested adding an amendment stating the deal covers all of Ukraine. Entrepreneurs are interested. That's a major amendment. And the second amendment is supposedly about certification. It only concerns this document, not some second or third one that might be attached to it. And here a very interesting situation arises. If they take this amendment into account and the deputies vote only for this in principle, then Zelensky can do it at any moment. Or refuse it altogether, basically just not take it into account.
I don't think America will like that. If it happens the way you said, it will probably be a violation of some agreements between Zelensky and Trump. I'm convinced that Zelensky probably told Trump in the Vatican, I'll do everything, we'll ratify it, I'll press them, push them, let's just do it this way somehow, and Zelensky will do everything for that. You and I both understand perfectly well that for every member of the Verkhovna Rada, there's a file with compromising material about their corruption activities, all that cash they take every month, and a second folder from the special services with compromising material in general, including of a personal nature, so to speak. And well, for me now, the parliament is, just a pure formality. It's been completely usurped. But even in this case, I still receive, once again, different kinds of information. Some are afraid of some kind of responsibility, and some are ideologically determined to resist. It's interesting to see how Zelensky will handle this situation. Here, though, I support explaining things to people more publicly. I don't know if you discussed this question with your guests. That person who says he gave up the country, made a bad deal on minerals, terrible, everything is against national interests and unconstitutional. What is the alternative here? Clearly, Zelensky caused this terrible situation and the poor deals. That's undeniable. Technically, what's the alternative? Let's say none of us sign it, goodbye, what should we do in Ukraine? Trump says, well, then go to hell along with your Ukraine, that's it. And Ukraine is left at Putin's mercy. And that's the comment. None of the opponents, former supporters, or current opponents give an answer to this question.
Well, I can give you an answer. We need to have direct negotiations with Putin. Because as practice shows, and the history of even this bloody and terrible confrontation that continues in Istanbul, during direct talks between the Ukrainian and Russian delegations, the conditions were somewhat acceptable. If we look at it from today's perspective,
all right, but you understand, or are you claiming that if it had happened that way, we would have gotten better terms than with United States mediation, the final terms?
I think better.
Well, you see, I'm absolutely not sure about that, not because something is wrong, but because we're already in a weaker position than we were during the Istanbul talks. Putin has already seen that Ukraine can be pressured further. Well, the weak position has already been clearly defined, whereas before it was denied. You remember the talks about the 1991 and 2022 borders and everything else. Kit Kellogg says we're ready based on the current line of demarcation. People were being brainwashed for 3 years. I don't even want to say with what. Now it's all deflating and now it's a mess, and Zelensky is just desperately trying to save himself. In my view, based on my activities, ideology, and vision of Ukraine, I also support direct negotiations. But considering Zelensky's dictatorial tendencies, even if we model it the way you say, then Zelensky would have to agree to the following. Well, let's be like Belarus. I'll set up a tyranny here, oppress everyone, and we'll live and work under your, so to speak, protectorate. And that's it. Some people are fine with that, I have no doubt, but I am absolutely not okay with it.
No, the point is that today Belarus and Ukraine are simply not comparable. Absolutely, due to the war and Zelensky's repressive machine, everyone is under surveillance and faces arbitrary security services. This is even reflected in the United Nations report regarding this Article 111, right? Collaborationism, which they accuse people of left and right, and then people are either tortured or exchanged or extorted, stripped of everything, and they profit from it. Yes, that's basically how it happens. So there's an ideological component here, a dictatorship. But the question is, how do people feel inside one country and the other? And, there's this moment there. Well, Putin isn't offering Zelensky to be like Belarus and have eternal rule. Zelensky is taking this eternal rule himself, and the West ends up with this. And the United States and Trump agreed with him. Zelensky works for Trump, he just needs a deal signed, and after that it doesn't matter who is president.
Let's go step by step. Trump is fine with Zelensky, but only until the deal is signed. Trump didn't guarantee or promise anything to Zelensky, despite the rumors spreading online. Let's also see how Trump acts after ratification, if the Verkhovna Rada approves this deal. Regarding Belarus, if today I started speaking out in Belarus, if I were a citizen of Belarus and lived there and spoke out, if I spoke out against Zelensky the way I did, I think it would be a matter of hours before something happened to me, but that's less important. Although for me, freedom is number one. Next question. I don't like it. I know there will be 1,000 comments against me after this video. But why are people only given two choices? So it's like either war, like in Ukraine, or spineless slavery, like in Belarus. Yes, without war. I'm not saying anything. Without war. And there's enough for bread and enough for kefir. But most Belarusians have never seen a normal life. They've never been abroad. These are the statistics talking, not me. It's all about your mindset and desires. I'm not opposing anyone's views or suggesting action because of them. Your opinion deserves respect. And those who write in the comments saying there is some objective reality, you talk about repression in Ukraine, of course. And if we're talking about Putin, believe me, Zelensky already really regrets that he didn't become a second Lukashenko. And he talked to the Europeans, to Trump, and now he thinks, why did I need all this? I should have been friends with Putin, ruled for 30 years like Lukashenko, and life would have been sweet, but now he has to beg and find ways to get by. I'm saying that it's in Zelensky's character. You remember when he became president, he went to Lukashenko and said, let's hold the Summer Olympics together. Remember that happened. That's his whole ideology, his role models. I just know what I'm talking about. It's Lukashenko and Erdogan. When he was running for president, he was literally absorbing all of this.
So it turns out that Fico is right when he says that the deal is, well, basically a bribe, or more precisely, with this deal, Fico says Zelensky bought the continuation of the war from Trump. Did you see the betting odds, how they immediately dropped for the likelihood of peace this year? Well, in case of ratification?
I think Fico is wrong. Again, Trump never promised Zelensky anything, and it's wrong to assume this deal means Trump will now send Ukraine lots of weapons. Well, I know there's this point of view supposedly taking future factors into account. The idea that mining minerals there will be paid for, or that current weapons will be supplied, none of that will happen. I'm just telling you, you'll see later. The State Department in Washington has decided no more weapons for Ukraine, no matter what happens, only a move toward peace. If escalation continues, Trump says, eventually there will come a moment when Zelensky will crawl on his knees. But I suspect, God forbid, if that scenario happens, it will already be without the left bank of Ukraine or almost without the left bank. Save us. I'll agree to anything. Alexander Zelensky simply chose the best of the two best options. He found himself in a zugzwang and he already started counting, calculating, and he simply chose, well, with Yermak, well, if we do this. Yermak was pressuring him to sign, and now there's a big quarrel in the president's office. Yermak is being sidelined, and Zelensky decided to just hold on for a few more months. If I don't sign, it's not a fact. That's what happened.
And who's leaking Yermak?
Zelensky's inner circle. The president's office has reportedly split. Like the Kremlin towers in the Kremlin, the president's office has already divided into towers, into spheres of influence. For example, Arakamia and Yermak are very different, and now a third group is forming. They act from deep within. There is also a deep state. These are the special services who also benefit from escalation. You've seen it. There's a scandal going on in social media right now. We're not tabloids, we're not the yellow press, but that's exactly how it is. It turned into a big scandal. Bloggersha Manzuk and Bloggersha Alkim there. About the language issue.
Yeah, I covered this yesterday in my live stream. Well, I covered specifically the language issue. I don't mean the confrontation, but the personal conflict. Because it's still, well, it's also blogging, but it's a slightly different line, you know.
Yeah, it's the same for me, but this is about politics. It's for people, let's say, maybe they just don't understand. Manzuk now posts in a style suggesting, I think the ancestors were People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs officers, the ones who reported neighbors during the Holodomor. Like, report to the Security Service of Ukraine, tag the Security Service of Ukraine, we need to deal with Russian speakers. I just don't have any polite words to comment on this. Actually, certain agencies are handling this and Manzuk is involved. Alkim is connected with other people, meaning Manzuk is a tool in the hands of the deep state to work with a certain audience. Not ours, Alkim. This is connected with other people. From one of the towers. Of course, these are just rumors. For legal purposes, these are all just rumors, and there is some kind of clash happening because some people still have common sense. Although he didn't play along with Zelensky in the current situation, saying that Russian-speaking people shouldn't be repressed, that this issue shouldn't be flaunted, and this network of hatred and discord shouldn't be continued, like people such as Manzuk do. She is the one pitting people against each other. And then, God forbid, if it comes to a civil war, she'll be the first to run away from Ukraine, or she'll be the first one people come to dispossess. History shows this is where it leads, and it's truly disgusting. It's not tabloid at all, it's pure politics.
No, well, if you look at it from this angle that someone is behind both sides, well, it's just reached the point of absurdity. They're desperate, as they say. Either she didn't sing the song, or she rolled her eyes, or someone posted something with a song by Basta's band, who was a friend of Basta, well, Zelensky. Well, I mean, before all these events, we all remember that, but it just needs to be explained. These are influencers, that's their lifestyle. Let's just say society can't do without it. There always have to be at least some so-called ladies, sometimes men, but more often ladies, whom everyone else follows and empathizes with their journey using the same cosmetics as they do. And somehow there's this group, quite a large group, a community, but who am I for? That's the question. They even threatened to kill Alkima seriously.
Like Farian and Alkima threatened to kill, and Manzuk too. She posted things like, be careful when you get in the car next time, and so on. This is exactly what I was speaking out against, what I predicted back when I started my YouTube channel. It just turned out that way. I feel these things very strongly. These are the first steps towards civil conflict, towards civil war. And it started a couple of years ago, already during the war. But now it's already reaching its peak. And this thing, look, if there's a truce now, it will get even worse later. because certain forces are acting on the principle of divide and conquer. They want to further divide people and fuel conflict to gain control over a portion. These people are usually very aggressive and they like it that way, but I definitely don't. When we end up just measuring skulls and blood DNA, I'm telling you for sure, if we go down this path,
The issue is everyone's DNA is mixed and the skulls look alike. If you take classic Russians and Ukrainians, well, you could also measure tongue length, right? That's also a pretty non-trivial way to go about it. Well, what do we expect in a country where that's also a shock? Dniprovskoye, a publishing house from Dnipro, is destroying the Ukrainian children's book Budinochok Meriai. Well, I mean Dream House, because its author, Yuliana Karaman, lives in Scotland and writes on social media in Russian. Well, she has some views about a single big country, free from everyone. I mean, she has her own vision of things. And so there's a kind of community. It turns out we have a community of book publishers. Well, in general, a book community, which is us, the publishing house. Sorry, we didn't know that she was so Russian-speaking and that apparently she wrote her first book there. And this little house that was published, it's kind of a translation into Ukrainian, and we just destroyed it. That is, they didn't even spare the money, they pushed it somewhere, gave a discount for cheap, somehow sold it off quietly, and that's it. So you understand that this power becomes even more valuable than some material things, well, basic commercial ones. A publishing house is a business focused on making a profit. Why?
there are still some nuances, right? But I want viewers to know what you described and what's happening between Manzuk and Alkim. This is much more dangerous than Putin's missiles. No matter how fantastic that may seem to some, it's much more dangerous for the state, because with all this, they will finish off what Putin's missiles didn't destroy. But many people don't understand this. A person lives, he was born in some region, he didn't choose the language, he didn't consciously choose it. That's how it happened, and that's how Ukraine became historically. Ukraine is complicated. And when they try to force you, like, don't listen to this music, forget those actors or something else. If a person accepts that, he breaks himself, meaning he loses himself, he's no longer himself. And if you project that onto millions, that's the end of society. These people are aggressive and don't get that. And what's most hypocritical, I watched Yanina Sokolova and also Kurbanova, how they were making great money in Moscow, in Russia, and kept going there even after the start of the hybrid war. And all of these people who had any kind of connection, Benyuk, today they're just super duper and they call me a traitor even though I've never been to Russia. I don't know a single person from there, that's it. And that's just terrible.
By the way, that's actually a similar story. So if you tried to think rationally, more or less like a pacifist, like cultivate tolerance, mutual understanding, you know, those kinds of proper things, basically human values. Of course, there are nuances of circumstances and time, we all face them, but still, this should be the main priority. Here, you're already a traitor, you get sanctioned, you get criticized for something else. Oh, you're basically a Kremlin agent, even though people aren't connected to Russia in any way, like you? Does it seem like this is some kind of turning point? For some reason, it seemed to me that if there were events at the May 9th parade, yes, that would also be some kind of turning point. Now this peak will rise, and then there will be some kind of fallout. Well, as you say, it will start to decline. I also think it will start to decline. I really hope that on August 24th, we'll have strong elections on Independence Day. That's all there is to it. So they'll arrange it, they'll specifically schedule early elections, and Zelensky will try to get re-elected. But why exactly am I saying this? So everyone knows there will be silence for about 2.5 to 3 months. That is, there won't be any fighting, it will be all about politics, all this stuff like reassignments and all that, so the war will basically be over. That's why I really want everything to calm down after this peak. And this confrontation between the Ukrainian-speaking and Russian-speaking communities, we've already reached this peak when Kremen comes out and says, listen, let's do inspections in schools. Why are they speaking Russian on sports grounds, in courtyards, in bomb shelters? Maybe they'll start kicking people out for that.
As I already told you, this will reach its peak in this direction after or during the truce, meaning that's the next stage. Right now we have a full-scale war, and next they will be pushing towards a civil war. They need division. This deep state needs division because that's the only way to stay in power and secretly control Ukraine while sitting on incredible cash flows worth billions. They don't need reforms or lower taxes or anything that I advocate for. They don't need any of that. They rely on the rotten system. And the question is how to divide people in order to gain the support of a huge percentage of society. And that's why something terrible awaits us ahead. In this direction, who will they exploit? People who return from the front, and they'll set them against others. They say, you shed your blood there, and this guy speaks Russian or something. I'm pro-American and pro-Ukrainian, but they label me an enemy just because I'm open to other viewpoints. If you or someone else, they say, kill him, jail him, deport him, or revoke his citizenship. Speak to the people and go out. I'll do the same. If they vote for you, you were convincing. Continuation, and that's it. And that's normal. And just like in America, do we keep fighting in the political arena or not?
Well, by the way, America went through very tough elections, ones that were very divisive, but still the system and let's say the traditions of democracy, everyone understands them. Yeah, now it's the time of Trump's Republicans. Some time will pass and then everyone starts working. So we see this. I mean, if we're talking about political systems inside the country, if we go back to a very important topic, I think Forbes Ukraine was quite illustrative, I believe. Yes, that publication released a rather detailed article. Then Herman Smetanin from Ukroboronprom came out, so that's about it. As I understand, it's a charged company because Forbes Ukraine. They couldn't have published something like that unless they were told by Ukroboronprom and, let's say, given the green light. Herman Smetanin is basically someone who is under orders, yes, a young, very young man who is heading the entire Ukroboronprom.
So,
what's the point? Ukraine, during the war, says that it will export weapons. The topic is quite non-trivial. Why? Because in order to export weapons, if you have developments, designs, components, or if you depend, your production depends on others, whether it's technology or physical things, you still have to coordinate this with the country of origin. You can take a British missile 100 times and finish it off there, but made in Ukraine doesn't work like that. In this arms industry, everything is thoroughly checked, yet this topic is still being promoted. It's astonishing that today information came in that the factory which supplied defective mines to the armed forces of Ukraine is getting a new order for 59 billion hryvnias. That's $1 billion, $400 million, $400 million. So it's not a big deal the Security Service of Ukraine director was caught there, along with more defective items. Why does Ukraine need to export weapons? What is meant by this and who is pushing it, in your opinion?
So look, does this mean that what is implied here is the reason for the continuation of the war? Making money? Today, the war in Ukraine, the only real motivation is making money by several clans and even small fry who serve them. Some, including those in uniform, are profiting from this situation. When they buy a third apartment in Kiev and a fourth car, registering it under their mother-in-law's name, that's all there is to it. As for making money, the war in Ukraine is the only real motivation for several clans to earn money. They feel pretty good buying, say, a third apartment in Kiev and registering a fourth car under their mother-in-law's name in America. Private companies produce everything, but there are open and classified documents in case America enters a major war or is attacked. There are documents stating that all exports stop and everything works only for domestic needs, meaning the government can be the only client. Poroshenko used to oversee everything, but now others are in charge. Pashinsky, you know, there's just insane money being made. You understand, it's absurd. Ukrainian Bronprom is exporting, and at the same time, someone like Sternenko or Libiga is saying, come on, chip in for drones. It's madness. A foundation displaying purchased artillery isn't the Ministry of Defense's responsibility. What's going on here? You look at all this, it's just some kind of madhouse.
Sternenko. Who tried to kill him? Russians?
In unclear situations, it's easy to claim Ganola was killed by Russians, but that wasn't true. And the same applies to this attempt. No, it was all just theater. And I kind of expected more from people. I know there are some smart people there and they're capable, but it was just way too primitive. You don't need to be a top investigator. Any intern could find 15 inconsistencies in 5 minutes. Based on what I see, preparations for the elections are underway. Even my followers, we've started to get anxious. They're like, come on, say something. And I can see by all the signs, by the sanctions against you, against Arestovich, against Oleg, and believe me, more sanctions are being prepared. It's a huge list. I know this list. I know who crossed out names from it last Wednesday. And they will introduce them regularly in small packages. Next, this is a tool for political blackmail, political pressure. And with Tasternenko, they're really pumping him up as a candidate for mayor of Kyiv.
Of course.
If I say so, I feel uneasy, but it's true.
After Klitschko, at least he had a name. Klitschko, that's it.
Believe me, Professor Klitschko, let's put it that way. I'm not his fan, I never voted for him, but he did achieve something in his life in the sports field. He was already a multimillionaire when he entered politics. Why bother? I think it was a huge historic mistake, but he is notable. But when a person has never worked a single day, never done any business, which is completely criminal and horrifying, and they just make him an agent and pump him up, then don't be surprised by the results. We understand this, but when I see 20 or 25-year-olds, they've just opened their eyes and believe all of this. Or Dennis comes to me and asks, what do you think about Ternenko? Why should we even discuss him? Who is he? What has he done in life? That's all. By the way, this is exactly the root of why the war happened or why it might happen. This is where it all starts, from this madhouse. The lack of common sense has driven people crazy. That's what I would say. People have been driven insane.
A message was published today. It's clear that it doesn't undergo such critical evaluation. What they mean is that if Ukraine breaks the ceasefire during these victory days, Russia will strike Kyiv with an Oreshnik. Actually, they'll strike Kyiv with 2 Oreshniks. Obviously, the publication of such information, especially by Russian sources that are completely tied to Russia, their intelligence services and their position, makes you think. Of course, people here just brush it off. Everyone says what targets, what Oreshnik. But if you try to break down this chain logically, it's clear that in Russia they're not talking about this in order to strike Kyiv with Oreshnik. This logic can be traced, but in Ukraine there's also the impression that any strike, with anything, even say a nuclear bomb on Chernihiv, I'm just making this up, don't be alarmed. So, for example, a nuclear bomb somewhere in a field, say in Sumy region, just a field, and a small nuclear bomb goes off there, a small one contaminating a small area. So nuclear weapons have already been used, and it's like a whole new game. That's exactly what Zelensky needs, that's what he wants. Because with all due respect and pain for the loss of loved ones and relatives who died there from Shaheds last night, today or yesterday in Sumy when a ballistic missile hit, children were also affected. In general, with all this pain, it's already not enough to turn the table and somehow play differently. What is your opinion on the topic of the strike on Oreshnikam? I don't know, on the decision-making centers.
Well, look, as a citizen of Ukraine and as someone who plans to return to Ukraine, of course I view this with concern, and God forbid that it happens. You said Zelensky would need such an escalation? I agree, but I don't think it's needed yet. Why? Because if Europe was supporting, but if you follow the whole chronology, at first, when Biden was there and Europe was working more actively, that's how it was. He went for any escalation to hold on to power, to get more money and everything else. Trump will not allow this anymore. Europe, as we can see, has frozen itself out. But pay attention. You started the broadcast and asked me, did hundreds of drones attack Russia yesterday? Did you notice that this topic wasn't really blown up even in the propaganda media and channels? So yes, but very modestly and not on the same scale. That's why I think that if they didn't present such a massive shelling as a victory, then nothing will come out of anything. And I don't believe in any Oreshnik, and God willing it won't happen. But I think Zelensky will act differently now. I think it's just bargaining now. He has only one thought, you understand, to get a second term. Basically, he's ready to do anything, just make sure I get a second term. And the point is, he told Trump about the second term, and right now that's the only thing that's important to Trump too. He didn't stop him from going, despite previous discussions. This occurred in the Vatican. On this deal, he neither forbade nor promised him anything, but also didn't say he wouldn't run again.
Yes, that means a second term. Of course, it's very interesting, but honestly, I don't really understand Yermak. Let's try to decipher it. Andrei Yermak makes a post. I've repeatedly demonstrated this on my broadcasts, explained how it's done, how it works during Easter. It was very clearly visible then. There are prepared posts written either by Zarevnaya or another assistant. Maybe it's not even Zarevnaya's job. So it's someone, some copywriter, who writes nice posts with selected photos, and they have everything planned out according to a media plan. They release them for this or that day. And there was a clear mismatch, especially with these recent events, and everything there was spontaneous. Putin announced a unilateral ceasefire in just an hour, which means now there is time to prepare. Why? Because Putin announced the ceasefire 10 days in advance, this unilateral one, and that's what he's writing about. Russians who talk about peace but don't want to stop the fighting attack Ukrainian cities and civilians with drones, threaten with wonder weapons, and worry about the parade for which they kill innocent Ukrainians. This is the state of the Russian psyche today, the psyche of their people. Putin, it's clearly written personally because you have to decipher every single story there. I have 2 points. It's clear that there's a dismissive attitude toward Russians, Russia, and Putin during the war, but that's an understandable trend. But for a while now, there's been a trend among all Russians are equated with Putin, like Putin is Russians themselves. Explain this trend, this positioning. Why do you think Yermak acts this way? And of course, this parade for which peaceful Ukrainians are being killed, so it turns out Russians are killing peaceful Ukrainians for the sake of a parade? Well, that's nice.
Look, that's all. Of course, you could just answer very briefly. It's just dumb propaganda. But there's another important point you mentioned. The path to Putin. Equating all Russians is just like Zelensky equating all Ukrainians. I'm convinced that 20 to 30% of Russians are completely reasonable. These are just my thoughts and what I observe. Unfortunately, among public figures and the intelligentsia, there turned out to be a much higher percentage of decent people than in Ukraine. Again, the way I understand life, the way I see the situation, I am absolutely against this. After our last broadcast, people called me a Russophobe in many comments. I'm not a Russophobe. I judge people by their philosophy, by their views, not by their passport, not by their DNA, not by their nationality, not by those things. Because in the mind, that's disgusting, that's horrible. Yermak does this because as head of the president's office, he has no choice. By the way, it's interesting, nearly the last 20% of these records were often just Google translated from Russian. There were just a few words per paragraph, so it's obvious the person wasn't writing in Ukrainian. Well, it's absurd, you know, it's kind of cynicism, it's hypocrisy, it's like a mirror world, everything is fake, you know, everything is fake. And that's how things are going for us. Well, I feel extremely negative about it, but he can't do it any other way now. What is he going to write? Is he really going to write something else? There's common sense, but as I said, the office is tense.
So could Zelensky sacrifice Yermak for a second term?
Yes, of course, there is such a plan.
An actual plan?
Yes, they whispered it to Zelensky. Now the media people, many have noticed, have turned around and started attacking Yermak. There is a certain plan and they've used it more than once. At first, excuse my language, he messed up. Let's blame Bodan, put all the negativity on him and call him Kolomoisky's man. That's how they slowly pushed out the Sorosiata, like Prime Minister Honcharuk, blaming him for everything. That's how we came to believe the Tsar is good, the boyars are bad, and the people. During the second or third year of the war, some people, even smart ones, told me, you don't get it. Zelensky just can't keep up with everything. They clearly don't understand what a president is or how the role works. So Mayim is what? Mayim
Uh-huh. It's an amazing story. Because there's an opinion that in general Zelensky works in Yermak's administration, in Yermak's office. So honestly, Yermak
set everything up that way. So Zelensky thinks that he's in charge of everything, and let's say it kind of seems that way, but since he doesn't really understand anything there will be a lot of surprises for him. But you have to understand, he's a real scoundrel. I'm not defending Zelensky, he's a scoundrel. Yermak is just behind all of this.
The architecture of scoundrels. Ukraine responds powerfully to the victory parade. In general, of course, this is a very interesting moment right now, a moment of a kind of unique geopolitical truth. I suggest we look at it from a slightly philosophical perspective. Well, not going too deep into the weeds, but just aiming with a perspective that looks a bit through things a bit further ahead. So, Ukraine is now launching drones, and as we're on air, we're getting reports that yet another airport, Zhukovsky, for example, in Moscow, has been closed as well because drones are flying. They're being shot down. Supposedly all of them are being intercepted, but you can't really see much data about it. Because in Moscow itself, there are problems with mobile internet, and I just want to emphasize that, well, in most places, it's mainly mobile internet. When people travel, they observe and try. Perhaps it will matter later, or perhaps not. And at that moment, the leaders of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, some of them arrived, some didn't. Ukraine has already reported this to Radio Svoboda Ukraine. Deputy Honcharenko added this insider info. So what is he suggesting? On May 9th, it's also Europe Day there, so we have the Day of Remembrance on the 8th. Tomorrow is the Day of Mourning for Victory, and the day after tomorrow, well, there won't be Victory Day, there will be Europe Day, and on May 9th, on Europe Day, they will gather in Lviv. It says leaders or representatives, which is interesting. So representatives of key European countries will be creating some kind of tribunal, which looks rather bizarre. In what sense? In the sense that there is already the International Criminal Court, there is this structure that both Putin and Netanyahu have disregarded, and those warrants are of no use to anyone. Some countries insisted, these are our relations, stay out. Basically, we're leaving your court altogether if you keep speaking out too much. But they're setting up some kind of tribunal, like on May 9th, and supposedly some leaders are coming to Kiev on the 10th. These are delegations, guests, and representatives. The dates differ, but they're usually representatives. Russia doesn't really strike at representatives. Yes, they attack, but now everything could change.
I don't think it will change, but this joke you told about the tribunal, I'll tell you what that is. Do you remember, a year and a half ago, if I'm not mistaken, maybe a year, Zelensky, like a madman, was traveling to probably 25 countries, signing agreements, security agreements, and everyone was promoting it. These are those useless dumps. Look, security guarantees from Italy, from Britain, from the United States of America, all of them. And where is all that now? What was it? I'll tell you, it was a circus, 95, a circus. Just another scenario. They need to boost Zelensky's ratings. Can't you come on May 9th to counter Putin's parade? They refused, saying everyone has their own things to do. The leaders? Let's at least try to do something. They'll claim we've set up a tribunal, but in 2 weeks they'll forget, like they did with the security guarantees. Trust me, this is just political, meant to show solidarity with Zelensky. Well, what can we do for you? We won't give you any money, so let's set up a tribunal for Putin. I'm exaggerating, joking, but that's basically how it is.
That's exactly how it works.
That's pure politicking.
Well, no matter what, even under Scholz, I believe that Germany is a key player in the European Union. Well, because it's a big economy, because it's subsidizing. That was always the story. That's how the European Union works. Germany paid more than anyone and gave Ukraine the most help financially. Well, I mean total aid, lethal and non-lethal, I mean any kind of aid. The Germans really helped Ukraine very, very seriously, and now it seems like this is being called the second-rate new Chancellor. Merz was elected on the second attempt. It's true they changed their minds quickly, but it's already a historical fact. It's attached to him and causes significant problems. He promised his first visit would be to Ukraine, and this isn't Paris, there are other visits too. Now, there's a message saying it'll happen in the coming weeks, but everyone is asking Merz, where are the Taurus missiles? And he comes out with a statement, already as the Chancellor, and says, you know what? Merz, we need the United States.
Yes.
It's just, I mean, what kind of metamorphoses happen? But there were some serious calculations by Bankov, and for Merz, who was supposed to win, why is that?
There were no calculations. They showed it in the press, and Mirza himself seeing this agenda, just knowing that there are still many people in Europe who want the war to continue. He played along with all of this, but you see, for the first time in history, he was not elected chancellor at all on the first try. And the AfD party, by the way, which I supported, has now actually become the leader after the elections, getting 25% and even surpassing the party that actually won the real elections. So all of this is now called realpolitik, which is a trend in the world. He will now deal with Germany, which faces many problems, especially economic ones. You're right, it's the largest economy in the European Union and Europe, but the economy will decline and Trump's tariffs are making things worse. Well, what about Ukraine? Tell me, please, is everyone in Europe going to deal with it now? By the way, regarding the AfD party, I support them in advance according to my ideology, or they are the closest to common sense among all parties basically around the world. And I explained this in advance. I'm telling viewers I supported the AfD and now I'm called a Kremlin agent. Why? I don't get it. Apparently you can't support the AfD because it's labeled pro-Russian. But where is it pro-Russian? It's pro-German, pragmatic, and uses common sense. And that's why Merz, I'm bringing all this to that topic. Merz was saying one thing. But he'll end up doing what the AfD declared. He'll be forced to deal with migrants, deport Syrians, focus on the economy, not on Ukraine. I'm explaining to you why this is being hyped up like this, though you understand it yourself. It's to show the viewers, to show people, look, Germany will help us, Merz will help, this tourist thing, none of that will happen. And unfortunately, our people, while living in Germany, are voting not for their life in Germany, but for Ukraine. They want Germany's chancellor or the United States president to focus on Ukraine. For example, they write to me, what has Trump done for Ukraine? But why on earth should he do anything for Ukraine? A priori, I'm in favor, but why the heck can I demand this from him? And should I tell me please, or from Macron or from Merz? Well, everything is completely mixed up in my head. I'll try, through YouTube, to give people a kind of cold shower, like people get a grip. If you don't like something in Ukraine, in what's happening, there's President Zelensky, the elected one, demand from Zelensky, look for the problem in Zelensky, don't look for the problem in Trump or in Merz. Although I'm not a supporter of Merz. Not at all, well, just for the sake of fairness.
Well, that's the basis of propaganda. I mean, I've always dealt with this, and I still do. From time to time, people come and talk, including experts. That's what they say, you know, when you ask a question about the actions of the Ukrainian authorities, they say, that's Putin. I say, why don't you go to Putin? I say, I'm not going to Putin because I have nothing to do with Putin. No, absolutely nothing at all. I mean, no passport, nothing. I mean, absolutely nothing connects me to him there. That's why I ask questions to my government, the one of which I am a citizen there, and so I ask the question. People avoid understanding this because it's easier. There, as it's known, there's a saying, you see a speck in someone else's eye, but you don't notice the log in your own, but you have to show that log from different angles. Dennis, what do you think about the future? It seems to me that they're really preparing some strange fate for us. I mean, for all Ukrainians. Here's how I'll put it. 2 future questions. One for Ukrainians abroad, one for those inside the country. Let's start with Ukrainians abroad, so to speak, which is, well, honestly, also some kind of barbarism. I'm not sure if Ukrainians did this in Prague, Czech Republic. Well, again, it's all these bad emotions, like, you know, with a bullet in the head, that's what starts to stir up. Yesterday there were some photos from Munich. Someone desecrated Bandera's grave, but what does Bandera have to do with any of this? I have a completely negative view of him from a historical perspective, but I believe my conviction is that you shouldn't touch any graves. Today there's news that in the Czech Republic they knocked down a monument to the unknown soldier. It's a small pedestal, but a beautiful one, very symbolic because it was installed as a gesture of gratitude from the Czechs to the Soviet people for liberating them from Hitler and the Nazis. They knocked it down and damaged it. It's nonsense from both sides. You can't do it with words, thoughts, or beliefs. That's how it is. And these Ukrainians who are abroad, Zelensky, when visiting the Czech Republic, promised to reward them with hubs. And what are these hubs anyway? Wait, but there's the embassy. There are these aid hubs. That's how it is abroad.
These are elections, Alexander. These are elections. This is one of, let's say, the points by which I also see the approach of elections. And you see, there will be a bill regarding the permission of dual citizenship. Finally, in 2025, they finally managed to do it. All of this is also so they don't lose out, including for themselves, especially after they have to leave Ukraine. All of this is done, it's all preparation for the elections, it's like the Ministry of Unity. This is also just dumb public relations and an opportunity to steal money, as you understand, because this costs tens of millions of euros. These hubs will tell me, what can you do? Rent a space, hang Ukrainian flags everywhere. Guys, come over and just sit. What else can they do but maybe offer water and bread? What is this? I was also thinking about this, even theoretically. It's just another public relations stunt. All of this is preparation for the elections. I don't know what kind of Ukrainian in Europe you have to be to think, well, Zelensky does something, so I'll vote for him. So people, don't fall for this. I'm speaking from my own experience. Just take it simply as the final convulsions of a dictator and the utter lack of common sense in propaganda. Look, notice, even if you judge by talent, is this even a talented decision from the point of view of elections? Couldn't they really come up with something better? Come on, admit it. This highlights the primitiveness of those advising Zelensky and making these decisions. So, the Ministry of Unity, how can a ministry unite people? The Ministry of Unity. And then Manziuk writes that 40% of the population needs to be killed. What is that supposed to mean? So what is this?
Yeah, well, the second example is inside. And what are these national resistance centers? Vereshchuk. So any citizen can come and learn tactical medicine, combat management, and drone operation. There's a whole list. They're opening them in every regional center, then in major cities, so they have a network. All of this is justified by the war, as everyone needs to be prepared. So they're grabbing men off the streets left and right. I mean, every day there's this terrible bizzification. We see it, but Dennis, everyone is invited there to receive it during their free time from work. Are they preparing these partisan squads, or do they think that the Russians will come in and capture all of Ukraine up to, say, Lviv, even though in Lviv they were the first to open, the first to allocate 60 million hryvnias?
Yes, I wanted to say through Prozoro.
They were the first in everything here. We're ready. Here's our center, 60 million. You understand everything, so what does this mean? Will there be partisans fighting against the Russian Federal Protective Service and Federal Security Service in Lviv?
Well, since I saw this 60 million hryvnia tender in Lviv, I'd like to believe it, but it's terrible. It will sound like these are just the usual last attempts to steal money, the last loopholes to steal money before peace, a truce, and elections, but I do feel some tension about it. Maybe they understand that America will pull out and they're really preparing the country for a guerrilla war, combining it with stealing money. I don't think it will help, knowing their organizational abilities and the stage of the war we're at right now. What are we even discussing? The authorities' actions are just absurd, don't you agree? That's not the issue. In Europe, we have hubs. Here, resilience points. There, resistance centers. I don't even know what to say. And Vereshchuk, who else, if not Vereshchuk, when it comes to money?
So Vence comes out and answers the journalist's questions, and there are his key points. This is happening right now. In general, it's probably impossible to solve the problem of the war without direct negotiations between Russia and Ukraine. So, it's kind of like a point for the Kremlin right away, because the Kremlin clearly says, we're ready, let's have direct negotiations. The United States and Europe are still on the same team according to Vance, meaning no one is going to break away or leave Europe, as Ursula von der Leyen clearly stated from the podium 2 days ago. He thinks the Russians are asking for too much. Vance. Meanwhile, there is a huge gap between where Ukrainians and Russians live. That is, well, interpret it as you wish, whether in a cultural, ideological, or any other context. And then there's talk about markets, the economy, the deal with Iran, and so on. What do you have to say about these statements by Vance? Everything from the American side lately is being presented in a very watered down way, really watered down. Even Vance somehow looks dull, Vance.
I think that's true, and people are discussing it. There have been fewer news stories about the negotiations, about how they've stopped, and in my opinion, that's only connected to one thing. Trump ended up with Putin's and Zelensky's demands on his desk. And right now, there's internal behind-the-scenes work going on just as they wanted somewhere between the Russian proposal and the Ukrainian one. So, some kind of compromise. Both sides will come out dissatisfied and will end the war. And if this doesn't happen in the near future, then America might just say, we're stepping aside and just watching from now on. That's why I think there's nothing left to offer. Yesterday, Kellogg made a rather loud statement lately, saying that Kyiv is ready to separate along the current line of contact.
That's betrayal, Dennis. Well, as Ukrainians, we can say that's betrayal. I mean, it turns out we're the ones taking it. It's clear that this principle was copied from Minsk. They tried to separate the forces along the anti-terrorist operation line in Minsk, but obviously it didn't work out. There, they were pulling back the artillery, but like the soldiers never actually separated. But here, look, this means Kherson goodbye. We basically have to not control Kherson. It's a gray zone, meaning entire cities end up there, those very places where blood was shed. Moreover, the Russians have to leave Enerhodar, free the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and the Ukrainian side has to do the same there too. Well, on the other side, there's Nikopol, right? So if you take 15 kilometers like that, the border is basically also a theater of military operations.
Well, look, if we approach this practically, even what you said, Kherson falls within those kilometers, the demilitarized zone, so Kherson will live a peaceful life without weapons. How would it suffer from that? The Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant should be managed by the United States, supplying electricity to both Putin-occupied and our territories. This is inevitable. Trust me, neither Ukraine nor Russia will control Zaporizhzhia anymore. The Americans will run it, considering everyone's interests. They won't send electricity to America, let me reassure you.
No, well, they can send money to Europe, make a profit, why not? I mean, can't we do it ourselves, you know? Actually, we have people handling those power flows and transfers. What a disaster with the power unit at the Khmelnytsky nuclear power plant. Just terrible. And what to do now? It's not clear at all. Let me remind you, everyone in the Verkhovna Rada voted to buy Russian units for the Khmelnytsky nuclear plant, but the Bulgarians were selling them first and then refused. We want to do it ourselves. We will develop it ourselves. Leave us alone. And it seems like the money was allocated, but there are no units, and there's nowhere to get them. That's how nuclear energy is.
Alexander, there is one short universal answer. If you manage like an idiot and rob yourself, then in the end, someone else will manage it. Here in our case, Putin stole a part, and something will be managed by the Americans. We had it all, amazing wealth and everything, since 91. Well, we messed it up, excuse my language, so don't blame anyone else. I'm not saying this to you.
Yeah, friends, I mean, people, let's sum up the results of our voting. 8,500 votes. We received 8,600. What do you expect after the May holidays? 6% say elections. Zelensky will try to get re-elected. 11%. Real peace talks begin. 31% record escalation. Well, something even worse will happen. And 52%. It'll continue as it is, exhausting everyone. Thank you very much. So, what can you say about the general mood, the overall situation?
That's kind of a lot, but there's no pessimism.
That everything will go as it is towards exhaustion.
No. How many escalations? Escalations?
How many escalations is a lot? 31%, every third one, I'm telling you.
People just don't trust each other, in my opinion.
Yeah, people don't believe in the world. So, friends, let's move on to the Q&A session. Please write what you think in the comments and in the live chat. Thank you for your support and sort of your participation. First questions from the YouTube community, and then we'll move on to the chat. So, yes, there's another question. Someone left a question. Yes, it's now 17:01. There's a ballistic threat in Kyiv and the surrounding regions. Yes, that means there's an air raid alert. There was also a question left for you from my closed Telegram channel viewers club. Yes, please. The question is as follows. After the Maidans, the people of Ukraine looked down on all their neighbors, not just Russians. And the basis of their pride was that Ukrainians are free people. They can change their government as often as they want, and they will never tolerate anything. What happened to the free Cossacks? What do you think?
Well, people who are opposed to my view of what's happening in life are trying to poke fun at this, and they just can't calm down about these Maidans. We realized we weren't as free as we believed. And the situation with us allowing Zelensky's dictatorship, which I want to emphasize again, I've been shouting about since the summer of 2022. They didn't listen, didn't believe, and underestimated it somewhere. That's how it turned out, and now I also, by the way, have no moral right. What we were doing at the beginning of the war, blaming Russians. Why aren't you going out into the streets? Why aren't you starting a revolution and all that? And this awful decision. When there was this idea like, let's ban Russians from entering other countries, remember what that was? Or deport them from other countries and throw them out. Putin, I realize now it's just terrible. So this is some kind of collective responsibility which is completely contrary to the values of Western civilization that I adhere to. We're not that free, and as Gordon says, Russians supposedly have a gene of slavery. No one actually has such a gene. It just makes me sick. I'm just sick of this. None of this is true. Yes, we are not such free people. A lot of people wanted a firm hand too, and at the same time now they've got a firm hand to enjoy.
Questions from the Pavlyuchichka community user. If the constitution says the subsoil belongs to the Ukrainian people and Zelensky's legitimacy is questioned, can Ukrainians later challenge the subsoil deal and refuse to honor it? Like, we are completely against it and this agreement is not legal. And an additional question. Dennis mentioned changing the constitution earlier. What exactly would he change?
So regarding the constitution, it needs to be changed completely. I would change everything using the American Constitution as a basis and adapting it to Ukrainian realities, as many successful countries have done. The first question was in 2 words, bring me back.
The first question was about resources. Is it possible to cancel the deal? Yes, folks, well, basically Zelensky is illegitimate, so the people can take it back for themselves.
No, these things don't work with Americans, and in the real civilized business world, that doesn't work either. No one will cancel anything, you'll have to follow through. I don't understand why people fear this deal. I'm telling the truth. They're just confused, living with strange ideas, thinking it's theirs when it actually belongs to the state. Don't believe in this constitution, that's all. I just don't want to talk about it. It doesn't work. This constitution couldn't work. It's terrible.
Andre, lately there have been discussions around chat, generative, pre-trained transformer, Grok, DeepSeek, and other applications. Humanity is developing applications. Is there a chance that in the future it will become an application for an application? What do you think about this? And are you a conservative or an innovator? Do you use such technological gadgets? Which ones? Thanks for your answer.
Yes, I actively use artificial intelligence both in business and in my personal life. Well, from the general ones, there's Grok and ChatGPT, and there are more specialized ones for creating different things, but mainly Grok and ChatGPT. I recommend it, especially given the state of medicine in the post-Soviet space. Upload your results and get a second opinion. You'll be surprised.
It's interesting, by the way, even with magnetic resonance imaging
and computed tomography scans, blood tests, x-rays, and by describing your symptoms, everything you can imagine.
By the way, this is universal in medicine, yes.
Just a piece of advice. I won't go into any specific business topics right now. This is just a universal tip, yes.
Use it, friends. For example, I didn't really know, yes, about medicine, about tests, thank you, well, something like that, yes. So, okay. Question. Good afternoon, if it is good. Dennis, you actively support Trump on your social media. Tell me, what was the trigger in your worldview that made you, as a Ukrainian, take the side of essentially the colonizer and slave owner of Ukraine after the failed deal between the United States and Ukraine? Thank you for your honesty, Gleb.
So look, I've been in business since I was 25, and I respect Trump and have read all his books. Well, basically thanks to entrepreneurship. Then he started running for office. I support him ideologically, and he's not a colonizer at all, but people are brainwashed by propaganda from both sides. I've liked him long before all this fuss. And as long as he represents If he embodies common sense worldwide and in America, I will support him. And Trump is the embodiment of common sense today. I'm for him, I support him. If I voted, I don't have the right to vote here, but I supported him for ideological reasons, not because of pro-Ukrainian ones.
So here's the question. Both the Russian and Ukrainian sides understand that Bankovaya doesn't fully control a certain military unit on the line of contact to maintain the ceasefire. Do they understand this in Washington, in your opinion?
That's a really good question. Yes, they don't control everything. Yes, they're in confrontation with some, but they're on their own. I don't want to share everything now, but they're digging a hole we might fall into. As for America, the files are there, and many are considered Nazis, fascists, and everything else. There were questions about many, and there will be questions about many. I want to draw attention to this. How did you, Alexander, avoid this? Did you see the poll? Yesterday, they published some poll where Zaluzhny, Zelensky, and Poroshenko are leading. Then, if you look at the parties, they even included the Azov party, which doesn't even exist.
Yeah, that was yesterday, but look, polls during wartime, especially during events like these, are obviously nonsense commissioned by someone. I don't believe in any so-called honest poll right now. These polls are just nonsense. It's just so they could show me so I could see myself in the top 3 or 5 or maybe in 6th or 7th place. Oh wow, that's here and it stuck with me, it stayed with me, and then when the time comes I'll remember it. So why are these polls being published now?
If we ignore the numbers, we don't trust the results. But we can understand that this is being done for a reason, that they're trying to prepare people for something, to brainwash them for something. They're turning Ukraine into a military camp where people must march in formation. I left Ukraine due to persecution for refusing to march in formation or follow orders. And so I want to tell people, if you want to live in a military camp, then by all means vote for someone at the top of that list. You'll be voting for parties that don't exist and whose ideology you don't know. But with military direction, this can't be allowed. If Ukraine turns into a military camp...
Good afternoon, Edward. A question for the guest. Dennis. What if the current government accepts Russia's terms for a permanent, unbreakable peace guaranteed by the United States of America instead of just a frozen truce? Will you stop your media struggle against the Zelensky government and company? Thank you.
So, I am conducting a media struggle, if you can call it that, out of necessity. Everything I do is driven by my ideology and vision for Ukraine. I stand for something, not just against something. In this case, I am against this government because it opposes the ideology that I support. It simply doesn't intend to allow it and is working to destroy Ukraine as far as the ceasefire is concerned. A permanent peace. A person doesn't quite understand the mechanism. First comes a ceasefire and then a full peace. And I always emphasize on my broadcasts that it's very important now to completely resolve all the issues that happened under Poroshenko. They left this abscess, this wound, and it burst in the form of a full-scale invasion. That's what I support now. It's tough, but we must resolve all the issues completely.
And this can be done this way. So, question, Dennis, your namesake. Good afternoon. Do you have the feeling that there are no cards left for Trump either? The latest statement about soccer, the Houthis have surrendered, strange images like the Pope. Trump doesn't influence the ceasefire in Ukraine at all. They're already looking for major victories wherever they can. Thank you.
Once again, people don't understand the complexity of the processes. People want simple solutions. People think that the biggest war since World War II can be solved in 5 minutes by making 2 phone calls. No, it doesn't work that way. The process is complicated. Trump is dealing with 2 dictators. That's, excuse me, not a very adequate situation. And both of them. That's, excuse me, quite a challenge. So be patient, and I'm being patient too.
Yes. Angelina Snesko, broadcast chat. Now we're moving here. Thank you very much. There are more than 14,000 of us online. Please leave a like, don't forget, and subscribe to Dennis if you're interested in talking with him. He does these streams regularly and also responds to questions. If for us it's like a segment, then there, let's say you can directly address the channel owner. Angelina Snesko. The question is, who are they planning to deport from the United States? I mean Ukrainians. What do you know about that?
I believe it will currently impact only those who entered America illegally, especially across the Mexican border. There are also those who participated in various rallies, and I urge people not to attend these rallies. It's embarrassing due to a lack of understanding, and by doing this, you're hurting both Ukraine and yourself. If the war ends or there's a truce, Trump will make decisions. For Ukrainians who arrived under Biden's special U4U program, that's a separate discussion. 95% have nothing to worry about, I believe. Ukrainians came here to work and pay taxes, not commit crimes.
So there was also news that there are some documents showing that Biden and the White House asked for deported people from America to be sent to Ukraine. This is what's called neocolonialism.
They just see us as a third world country. Why? For example, they have an agreement and pay money to Salvador. Nayib Bukele is considered one of the world's best presidents, building a massive prison and defeating crime. Now, they're planning to go to Africa, but that's another story. They view Ukraine similarly, but people don't get that.
And I suggest...
So that they don't think that way, we need to do something about it.
It's hurtful, Dennis, it's hurtful.
And it hurts me too.
Dmitry Mikhalkov, please ask how Vietnam, Afghanistan and Iraq fulfill the agreements on mineral resources. Maybe the guest hasn't heard about this.
I have heard, I have studied, and I repeat when a person has a certain attitude, like he does. In this case, the questioner is always searching, especially for things he doesn't understand. Negativity. These people never offer alternatives or suggestions. Tell them, what kind of Ukraine do you want to see? Similar to which country? He won't answer you, and Zelensky, by the way, won't answer either, nor will any politician in Ukraine.
Renata writes, well, she writes in English, is there a difference between Russian and Ukrainian? Is there a difference between Russians and Ukrainians in your view?
I'll say something terrible, something that's offensive to me. As of today, May 7th, 2025, I've come to the conclusion that there's minimal difference, practically none. Unfortunately, I used to believe otherwise. At the beginning of the war, I wondered, how are we different? This refers to Manjuk and all of that.
Yes, a lot becomes clear. So, look at these questions. Why is someone not in the trench? Come on, after all, these are just propaganda things right now.
They ask, why am I not in the trench?
Yes, so why isn't he in the trench?
I can answer that, no problem. You haven't seen my military or medical documents, but that's not the point. Why should I put my family at risk, be left without the only breadwinner? While Yermak is growing a fourth chin and everything else and packing up billions. Why? Just answer this question for me, the one who's asking no. When it's like Israel, we'll talk.
Well, that's true too, but it won't be like in Israel. Yeah, we don't need it, and we really don't need it. We have our own tradition, our own path, our own worldview, values, and upbringing. Although lately, of course, you're right, judging by the church seizures, these language scandals, all this lawlessness, listen, I think we've already lost some of that. Alexander Kleaus. Hello, I have a question. Considering undoubtedly the authorities' better awareness, the threat of losing American visas for RADA deputies is possibly a signal of the end of Europe, maybe even to leave the continent, and it's important specifically to leave the continent. Or is that their prize? What are your thoughts on this threat?
No, it's just that the deputies understand where they are, what we've come to. They still want to come to America in the future for vacations, for their own business, and for other purposes. They were really scared by this. If someone thinks they want to go further to America, then I don't advise either deputies or anyone else to come here. Everything is monitored here. Anyone can be jailed for actions done anywhere in the world. That's the problem. So, believe me, they don't strive to live in America. First, it's very expensive, and second, it's dangerous for them.
The question is...
Many of them are already on blacklists. They just don't know about it.
Well, they don't publish them, you see, and they're unlikely to publish those blacklists. No, I mean...
Even if someone has a tourist visa, like some deputy, he comes here, and at the very least, he'll be denied entry. It's that simple. I can say, a visa doesn't solve the issue at all.
Well, things are specific in the United States with transit, with passes, with inspections, with checks. Oleg, question, what does it mean to occupy Greenland? That's a direct statement from Trump and a bunch of outraged exclamation marks.
Question. Trump did not rule out any approach for the sake of global security. And I actually made a separate video on this topic, by the way, featuring Putin's speech. First of all, it's a danger for Russia if Greenland becomes American territory in terms of Russia's geopolitical interests. Russia wants to threaten everyone everywhere, so the person should study the topic more.
Yes, they don't want to trade with everyone from everywhere, including Russia. The longest stretch is this coast of the Arctic Ocean, the North Pole, and if the United States has Greenland plus Canada, then the balance shifts quite a bit.
That's right, I agree, of course.
That's why Canada...
That's why Greenland too. Trump shares the same goal, but people think he just wants to annex land. Who needs that?
Question, tell me, what has to happen for Zelensky to become president a second time? Will everyone run or will everyone be against everyone? Enter this column. This is as far as I understood from the text.
A nightmare for me, for many, for everyone wanting to return to Ukraine. And I'll be honest with you, I just don't see it happening at all from any angle in any way. But we have to admit, they have a lot of resources and they've completely lost their minds. So we have to work to make sure this doesn't happen.
Sergei Kromov asks a question, please answer. To the question, is there a chance that India or China will offer Ukraine to develop a specific position on significantly better terms than the United States? Ukraine will have to refuse within the framework of the agreement.
I suggest not worrying about nonsense. I could give a better answer, but people get lost in details. Well, it's fantastic, but why, really, why these phantasmagorias?
So what phantasmagoria? China comes in and says, I'll mine some stuff from you and I'll pay you more, and Ukraine won't be able to anymore. Ukraine is engaged, or like already married, you know? So the question is, it's impossible, it's a very specific question. So that means... So Dennis is very worried about Ukraine from afar. Well, Dennis would be worried about Ukraine inside Ukraine too, if Dennis wasn't being pressured.
Want to hear? I have an interesting story about Sergei Gaidai, the political strategist. You probably know him. So, about a year ago, he gave an interview to a blogger, and this blogger asked about me and Arestovich. He said, I would advise Yelisevich and Arestovich to return to Ukraine and serve time in prison if they want to be involved in politics.
Do you understand?
Yes.
Well, he also had, this is from recently when he was commenting on Arestovich, I came across it, not prison, he says, but the trench.
Uh-huh.
Return to the trench, earn it, then enter politics.
Yeah, and now anonymous security service of Ukraine channels are threatening to put him in jail and deal with him. This is about not asking for whom the bell tolls, because it tolls for you. That's what's happening with Haidai. All these questions about why someone is or isn't there, or why not this. I felt perfectly fine in Kiev, I was doing great in business, and today I would have kept doing that even during the war, but I wouldn't have been able to, let's say, given the current circumstances. That's it. I left due to political persecution, not for a better life.
By the way, do you understand the issue? So, Sergey is wishing me a happy radio day. Yes, Sergey, today is radio day for all radio enthusiasts or anyone involved with radio. After all, there are dates that are important. Well, maybe for some specific people, but in general, that's a long story. In Ukraine, that's just how Radio Day is. Friends, thank you all very much for joining our broadcast. Dennis, thank you as well for your time and thoughts.
Thank you for the invitation.
Friends, subscribe, don't forget to like, hit that button, for God's sake, so that YouTube understands who we are, where we're from, and who wishes you goodness and light every time. This isn't the only live stream today, there will be more later. Kost, Bondarenko, and Noise, that's why we're far from YouTube and the Alexander Sheles channel. Don't go away, we'll definitely see each other soon.